introduce. So welcome everyone. And in this demonstration, we have Chef Susan Notter. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you. It's nice to be here today. So we are going to begin with some rolled fondant. And what I prepared already is a cake. This is a 6-inch cake. And I filled it and enrobed it with a mango and passion fruit flavored buttercream. Of course, when you make a cake, what's very important before you actually start enrobing it, that the cake is very level and very straight. So that is an important point. So make sure that you're leveling off, your sides are nice and straight, and also kind of stand down and look at your cake like at eye level. We always have a tendency to kind of angle our cakes, and in order to help me get this straight, I always just use like a flat scraper like this, and that way I can put it right down on the board and against the cake, and I can like revolve this around. On my final coat, I normally heat my scraper up a little bit, and that kind of melts that final layer, so it makes it nice and smooth. Okay, so I did just get this out of the refrigerator, and I did wash my hands thoroughly before we started, okay? I personally don't always like wearing gloves, and I know it's not the world we live in anymore, but I did wash and sanitize my hands, my work area. I just think it's easier for me to feel and not have that friction and the heat also of the latex in between what I'm doing. So the first thing I have to do is kind of just make sure that this is a little bit slightly tacky maybe, so my fondant is going to stick. So in production, you might want to have like a very light spray bottle where you can kind of just mist your cake a little bit and add a little bit of moisture. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go to my sink. I'm just going to dampen my hands slightly. And I am in my kitchen at home. I have my friend Maria with me today, and she is helping me film. So we are I'm just going to make this just very slightly moist. You don't want too much moisture. This also gives the opportunity that if you've got any little bumps or anything that's not quite even, you can just ease that out a little bit and make it slightly smoother. Okay, so now I'm going to dry my hands, and now we're going to go on to getting the fondant rolled out. So I'm going to move this to one side a little bit. Now I did color my fondant, and I wanted to do something bright and make us all feel good, right? So I'm going to use orange and purple today. Very bright, energetic colors. So when I have my fondant, and I did color it ahead of time. So when I'm coloring my fondant, what I'll do is I'll take the white fondant and I'll just take a little bit of it and I'll add the color to a small part. I personally prefer to use paste colors for the fondant, because if I use liquid, I'm adding a lot of moisture to the fondant and it can get sticky. Powder colors, I would have to dissolve in liquid first anyway. So the paste colors I find are really good. And I will just like knead the paste color into the fondant until it's nice and smooth. Wear gloves to do this, otherwise your hands end up all colored. And then I would add that to my main body of fondant and knead it in. And I can still go back if I need to deepen the color a little bit. I'd always recommend you keep a little bit of white separate, just in case you add too much color and you have to lighten your fondant up a little bit. So to get started with rolling, first of all, I'm going to make sure, almost like a dough, that you knead the fondant first so it's nice and smooth. And it depends a little bit on the type of fondant, the brand you use. Some of them are a little firmer than others, but you definitely want to kind of do this like almost like a bread dough with the nail of your hand. Just get it nice and smooth so you have a really nice smooth surface to begin with. And then I'm going to dust a little bit of powdered sugar on the table. So just finely, not too much. I'm going to take my fondant, I'm just going to press it down a little bit, and I'm going to roll it out. Now my cake is round, so I want to roll my fondant out that it's nice and round. Not the state of Texas, okay? Not the shape, just nice and round, just like you would roll out with your pie doughs or anything else. So I'm going to roll one way, and then I'm going to keep turning to make sure that it doesn't stick, because the worst thing is obviously everything sticking to your table. So back and forth, nice even pressure, and then turn your fondant regularly So you will make sure that you get it nice and even. Now, I want to roll it, I mean, not too thick, but enough that it's going to give you a nice coating. We're also going to smooth it as we add it to the cake as well. So smoothing and easing the fondant down the cake also will thin it a little bit, but you don't want it so thin that you can see through the fondant, okay? So round shape, again, lift it, it's nice and flexible. I can actually cut some of this away. I'm just gonna use a pizza cutter just to cut through here. Just get rid of that. Always put the extra back into a plastic bag. That way it doesn't dry up. One trick is if you do roll it out and you don't have time, something happens, maybe you can't put it on the cake straight away, cover it with a Silpat. It kind of seals it a little bit and it'll give you, it won't dry out quite so quickly. So, see how we're doing. Make sure it's nice and loose away from the table. And I can feel with the palm of my hand like the evenness of the fondant. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to make sure that I have enough fondant to cover my cake. So if I take my rolling pin and I put it over this top, I can tell probably by about the length of my rolling pin is about what I need, because I've got my middle, so I put my fingers here, and then what I need to go down the side. So it kind of gives me, I can judge about how much I need. That makes sense? So if I take my rolling pin this way and this way, I know that that's going to be enough to cover my cake, okay? So one way we can fold it and we can lift it over the cake. If you have bigger cakes, I'd recommend that you take it and you maybe roll it over your rolling pin. Don't put too much pressure on it because you'll see the bumps of the rolling pin. And then you can put it onto your cake. But with the small ones, we can go ahead and always keep your hands kind of flat so you don't pierce your fondant. And let's just lay that over the top. And down the side. Okay, so now with the flat of my hand, I'm going to work on getting this smoothed out. Now there are cake smoothers. I unfortunately don't have any at home. So the cake smoothers have a flat surface, have a little handle on, and you can do the same thing as I'm doing with my hand, but by keeping my fingers together, I'm kind of polishing, and I can also feel sometimes little air pockets get trapped underneath. If that happens, just lift it up a little bit, but I can feel now this getting nice and smooth. So 6-inch cakes are a little tricky to cover because we're taking it down a very narrow area. So what you want to do is just very gently, a little bit at a time. Don't think you have to rush it, okay? So I'm just easing the fondant down the cake. And every time I go around, I'm easing it a little bit further. Now, even if you have a square cake, you still can do this easing down and even get the corners covered without having to cut the fondant away, as long as you go very, very gradually. So if you need a fondant covering like a fancy hat, you can actually just leave it like this, or a tablecloth, you can let it drape down the side. So a little bit, just take your time, keep your fingers together so it's giving you even pressure. And we're just going to ease it, and we're getting down. So I'm lifting a little bit slightly as well. And then once I get it down to the bottom, I'm going to use the whole of my hand to kind of smooth everything out. And then I'm going to take that pizza cutter again, just to trim everything off. I like the pizza wheel because it rolls, so it doesn't really tear the fondant. It just cuts it, you know, when it rolls. So sometimes with a knife, you might get a slight dragging, and you don't get that with a pizza wheel. I am going to do a rope around the bottom of the cake. A lot of times, you know, we can use ribbon. If it's like a wedding cake, it might be a ribbon, some, you know, color corresponding, or a piped border. But today our focus is fondant. So I'm all the way down the sides, and I'm just using my hands again. Now, another trick is if you get any little air bubbles in, sometimes when we're folding or kneading the fondant or incorporating food color, you might get some air pockets in the fondant. And if you do see a little air pocket, have a little pin like this one. Make sure it has a little top on it so you can actually see it. And then you would like go down and you kind of pierce into that little air pocket and pull it out at an angle, and then just gently like smooth that little air pocket out. So that's a good trick to have. Put the pin back where it belongs. You don't want your customer eating that, right? So, and now with the pizza wheel, I'm going to go around the bottom edge, kind of cutting at an angle, nice and firmly into the base. Now, if I'm doing a cake that's going to be stacked, say it's, you know, it's a wedding cake, it's tiered, what I also want to make sure of is that I have a support underneath the cake. So I typically would cut like a little cardboard disc or a cake board that fits like perfectly underneath the cake. You don't even see it. And then when I cover it with fondant, what I actually do is cover the cake board as well. So when I'm lifting the cake and stacking it, it gives me support. It's not cake on cake, but it's got the board. So now I'm just going to use the turntable, use the flat of my hands to just really work on smoothing this out. Like I said, I am going to do a border around the bottom, but getting your side nice and smooth is very important. And I do sometimes judge cake competitions from students, and you know, one of the first things we look at is, you know, how smooth is the fondant, that it's not dry, it's not cracked. Okay, so that's really something that's a very basic, and you always have to do the basics right first before you kind of move on. Okay, so we're going to, I'm going to move the cake off. I'm just going to clean my table a little bit too, and put my fondant away. So I'm just going to clean this down.
Chef, while you're cleaning that up there, can you touch on the type of fondant you were using, please?
Yes,
out there you would recommend.
A lot of, you know, different fondants on the markets. The one we're actually using, you know, again, because I'm at home and limited supply, so we actually went to Michael's and just picked up the fondant there. But if only honesty, it's not my favorite. It works, but I find it's a little on the soft side. So if I had my absolute preference, there's a line of fondant that AUI Fine Foods carries that's very good. I'm going to use one of the decorating pastes a little bit later that's a little bit firmer. But, you know, for right now, for the demo, I think what it was just one from Wilton. So works fine. But sometimes, you know, it's like flavor, price point, workability are all things that we consider when making our choices. Okay. So
and just one more quick interruption, if I could, Chef. Your sister is on, wants you to know she's on, and looks like she may making some fondant something with you. Just as
say hi, Julie. It's my sister in England.
Well, thank you for letting me know that. Technology is amazing, huh? All right, so now what I want to do is I want to do like a little rope border around the bottom of my fondant. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water And I'm just going to brush this bottom edge just to make it stick. You don't need a lot. It's just gonna kind of make it tacky. So, you know, water and a paintbrush, it's fine, okay? And I'm going to do a rope around the bottom. Now, first of all, I want to make sure that I measure like the length. So I cut a ribbon. So I know that I need about this length of a rope border to go around the base. And I'm going to now take purple fondant, and I'm going to make a rope, and I'm going to put that around the base of the cake. So I've got a piece, I don't quite need all this much. So now, again, you begin by kneading. Get it nice and smooth. And into the center, so you always have a nice smooth surface. And now what I'm going to do is just start, again, both hands, and nice and evenly as possible, just make that rope. So again, if you're used to doing, doing any work with bread, you should be okay, but let the table do the work. Put your fingers should be together and angled, and just nice even pressure, and come from the middle out. So I can already tell I have enough length. Maybe make it just a little bit thinner. So I said, you know, as a border, I'm going to do this right now, but you can easily do just a piped border as well. You've got, you know, royal icing. If you have extra buttercream, and you can pipe it. But the borders are important, just to clean up the edges, really. So don't forget to do some kind of border. I think it always makes things look a little bit more finished. So make sure it's nice and even. You can move this out of the way. And now what I can do, you have to kind of decide, okay, what's the front? So we're always looking for the best part to be the front, right? So I think that's going to be my front. So I'm going to add my rope, and wherever I have the seam is going to be more towards the back of the cake. You know, I can always do, like, I'm just going to cut through. So where the join is, I could do like a little button, you know, just you can make something decorative just to go over that. Okay, so now to make this a little bit more fancy, I'm going to use crimpers. So little pinches like this. So what I'm going to do is just kind of pinch. And this is a very simple way to make a decorative border. And of course, you know, you could brush some luster on this if you wanted to. Add a little bit like a gold dust to kind of make it a slight accent. So I'm just kind of pushing in and squeezing together as I do this. Okay, so that gives me kind of a little collar on the cake, which I think makes it look a little bit more finished. Now on the top edge, I'm also going to use the crimpers. I've got a slightly different shape, so they're like little heart shape almost. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to just crimp, if you see the pattern. So I'm just going to keep going. And again, it just gives me a little nice finish. You know, I know you could probably all hear I'm originally from England. So in England, we have this almond cake, which is different colors. It's like almost like a little bit of a checkerboard pattern with the cake. It's called a Battenberg cake. And we enrobe it with marzipan and then do this same kind of crimping pattern. But this just, again, it just kind of finishes that edge and just gives it a nice, clean, yet, you know, it's a simple border, but it looks finished. Okay, so now we have our cake in base and we have a border, and we are going to do some roses to decorate. So to make my roses, you don't need any special tools or anything like that. We'll keep it simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fondant. So I'm going to do purple roses and some white leaves and tendrils. And the first thing I'm going to do is to kind of knead it and I make a sausage, okay, or a log. And what I need to begin with is I need a center. So I'm going to cut this, and then I need individual pieces for the petals. And I need, for the rose I'm going to do right now, I just need 6. So you can do this, and then you can do this. Okay, so what I first need to do is to make the middle. So I roll it in the palm of my hand so it's nice and round, like a little round ball. And then with this part of my hand, I take this together so I make it pointy, okay? So you have that nice kind of round piece like that, okay? So that's the first thing we need. Then we need our petals. So I'm just going to make little balls and I'm going to squish them down just a little. Like I said, I'm going to make 6. I will do 2 roses, just so you see it, twice. And this is a very easy way of doing a rose. Like I said, you don't need any special cutters or tools to do this. We just use our hands and we use a teaspoon. So now I need to make those petals nice and thin. So gently with a clean teaspoon, I'm going to go around in a circular motion, and I'm just going to make sure one of the edges is nice and thin. So I go round and round and then just thin out one of the edges a little bit. And I need 3 petals for the center, and I need 3 petals for around the outside. So now, with my fondant being a little on the softer side, especially the outside petals, I might need to let these just sit a moment to firm up slightly. But now I'm going to just kind of smooth. You can use a piece of wax paper to do this, to kind of make them shiny. So now I have to release them. So I go from the thicker side to the thinner side and just pull these up. Just quickly, and I'm just using a small offset to do this. Okay, see that's got a little bit misshapen, but it's okay. So I'm going to do the center first, and what I might actually do is I might do 2 centers just to show you. Okay, so again the same thing. I'm going to make the middle piece. It's almost like a little carrot, and now it's almost like a little. I'm going to use 3 petals, so it's like a kind of a windmill, okay? So I take my center, and if your fondant's a lot less moist, and maybe not, you might need to just dampen this a little bit, but right now I don't need to. So I take my first petal, and I wrap it with the thinner side up, just slightly around my bud, okay? So that's just laying there like this, all right? Then I take my second one, and I slot it inside the first one, and I bring it around just a little bit. You see? 2. And now my third one goes inside my first one, and now I can kind of close them around, right? And I squeeze a little bit at the bottom, and if you want, you can just kind of open them up slightly to give you the center of the rose. So really simple. So let me just do that again. So we have 3 petals. So my first one is going to go, put my thinner side up nice and tight, about the same height as the tip. So don't progress down the bud, otherwise it'll look like a pine cone or a cabbage. And the second one goes inside the first. You can just link that over a little bit if you want. And then the third one goes inside and overlaps.
and you close it up, okay? And then if you want, you can just pull them open a little. So that's the center for the roses. Okay, so now I need some more petals. So we're going to do the outer petals. I did do a couple in advance just because of the necessity to dry slightly. So I'm going to do this first with the fondant, and then I'm going to use another product just to show you one more that's a little bit firmer. So again, spoon, like this. So make sure that one edge is a little bit thinner. And let me just grab a piece of wax paper. Sorry, I now have some somewhere here. So with the wax paper, what I'm going to do is just kind of polish. Makes it just a little bit shinier. Okay, again, thin, thick side to thin, just scoop this up. So now my outer petals, I'm going to fold them back and then just pinch them like that. So the back edge, so they fold over, okay? And then these, I would allow them to sit, pinch them like this, and back, and back, and like that. So 3 petals, and of course, you know, the bigger the rose, the more petals that you can add. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the first 3, and I'm going to start where one of my petals kind of ends, and I'm just going to kind of wrap that around, and I can still pinch a little bit too. And the next one, wrap it around, pinch a little, and then one more around this. You know, and if you wanted your rose to be more open, you do some more, and you can like have your petals layered out a little bit. So that's the way that you've got 3 in the middle, and you're always going in a circle. And then when you put them on, try and stay about the same height as well. So again, if you progress down the stem, that's when you're gonna get your pine cone effect. So here I had some I made in advance. So these were made yesterday, and you can see they're a little bit firmer. So the fondant does firm up slightly, which makes it a little bit easier to handle. Like this. So you see those are a little bit more stable because they've actually sat overnight, and that way. Now at the bottom, I'm always left with a little bit of extra fondant. So I would suggest you trim this away. Okay, you don't want to see that big kind of color there when you put them on the cake afterwards. So we just move that out of the way. Okay. So there is another product you can also use. So this is Decor Magic, and it's much firmer than fondant. So it's the product that we have, you know, from Felklin. And what I would do with this one, you need to knead it really well. I could just show you a piece here. So this is pretty firm paste. It dries nice and firmly too, but it's not like as hard as, let's say, gum paste. So if I'm modeling this, you can see like I'm squeezing it a little bit more. But with this one, again, I can build my roses and things in the same way, but it's going to give me a little bit more of a firmer structure. And then if I did my petals, and I'll just show you quickly, just a couple. But I would use this in the same way. So I'd cut it down, make sure you work it through a little bit.
Chef, did I see nuts on the ingredient list there? Hazelnuts and almonds?
No, I think it just says made in a facility where nuts are present.
Okay.
It's just kind of a disclaimer. You know, a lot of places do that because
Oh, good.
we, you know, produce almond. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just polishing this out, and then this one as well. I just do another petal so I can do the three. And of course, you know, you can do rosebuds and things as well, which it's nice to add in to your little bouquet. I think when you're arranging flowers, always make sure they come together. I mean, I always look kind of see, you know, how would a bouquet be tied together? How would a florist put this together? Because a lot of times we see, you know, if I'm judging really separated and you see underneath them, and you know, you want to be able to cover up with leaves and that type of thing. So you can see this now is a lot more stable. And now again, going around the center.
Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt you here. I think your phone might be on speakerphone or somehow the volume changed. If you're able to look at that quickly.
Yeah, it may have been because we moved. Is it okay now?
It still sounds. Try talking again. Let me see.
Okay, is it okay now?
Oh, yes, at least on
Yes, okay,
for everyone else.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can see, you know, with this one, it firms up really quickly, and it's a firmer pace than, let's say, a fondant. So doing a lot of roses and that type of thing, this is a good solution other than rolled fondant to use all the time. So that's just something else. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my roses, and I also did a few leaves and some tendrils, and we're going to arrange those on the cake. So for the tendrils, again, I'm going to do thin, just roll these pieces out and down to a point. Now, what you can also do is you can get like a piece of plexi or a cake board or something flat and just roll like this, putting more pressure on one side, okay? And kind of twist these pieces like that, okay? So now I'm gonna grab my cake again. And it's my front. I'm going to put a little bit of, just a little bit of water in the center of the cake where I'm going to kind of build my roses, just so it's a little tacky when my pieces go on there. And then I'm going to take my roses like this, and I'm, see, okay, we'll do that. So sometimes I cut them so they're slightly angled, so they fall like so they're falling forward a little bit, okay? I don't, you know, I personally don't like to see these really thick stems on pieces. And the third one in there. And of course, you know, with time that moisture will dry a little bit, and that's also going to help stabilize and make everything stick. So now I have some leaves, and I made the leaves with the Decor Magic, so they're white. For the leaves, I rolled them out, and I actually used a cutter. So I've got a little bit here rolled out as well. So for the leaves, what I did is I used the pastry cutter, just did one side and then the other, so you don't even need to use a leaf mold. And then or leaf cutter, sorry, just smooth it out a little bit. Can just scoop this up. And then I just indented. And I can pinch this together and just twist a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to add our leaves. I might just do a little bit, just brush a little bit. And I always think it's good, you know, things should be in the middle and then come out to the outside. And I think the white with the purple and the orange looks nice. And then I have the tendrils as well. I just made to make sure I keep an eye on, you know, like what's what's the front. But really with a cake like this, I mean, you really don't necessarily need to have a front and the back. If you think mostly, you know, cakes would be put in the center of the table. So you definitely want to kind of think, you know, going all the way around. This one, I can actually stand up a little bit in the middle. Okay. So there we have just, you know, few basic techniques with fondant. I think, you know, enrobing your cake, the most important thing, there's no cracks. That's always the first thing that I am going to look at, that it's nice and smooth and you don't have air pockets in there. Roses are very easy and simple way to make, almost like building a little propeller and building around the outside of it. And, you know, without many special cutters or anything else like that. I think it's always, you know, I like to be able to work with kind of the minimum amount of tools as possible, because, you know, we just don't always have them. And especially situations like this, you know, we're working from home. So this would be one way to use fondant on a cake. Another way is to actually make little figurines that, you know, we may see kind of out of marzipan or something. So I made a little bear out of the Decor Magic. I'm going to have to do his eyes, but if you'd like me to quickly make the bear for you, what do you think? Would you like to see how to do it? Chef Autumn, are you still there?
I think that's a definite yes. May I ask you 2 questions though before you get to it?
Yes. Yes.
First off, if your fondant cracks, what's a way to fix that?
I would just kind of work by, you know, smoothing your hand, right? Really trying to, you know, as you're smoothing, you're also warming it slightly. So I would really try and, first of all, just try and use the smoothness of your hands or your cake smoother, and just kind of work in like a gentle circular motion and kind of ease up the fondant. Sometimes, you know, make it a little bit thinner or something, just kind of ease it back into itself and just try and smooth, you know, and if all else fails, put a flower there or pipe something, you know, just decorate.
Did everyone hear the world famous tip? Cover it up with a flower. That's great. One other question was the Deco Magic. You got that comes through Albert Ooster Imports, correct?
Yes. So it is a Felton product, but it is available through AUI Fine Foods, and they do have an online ordering platform as well. So, you know, if you don't have it, you can actually go online and order it. It is so for home use, it's a pretty big bucket, but, you know, obviously in your industry or you're doing a lot of cakes and stuff like that, it's the type of thing. And a lot of, you know, it has a good shelf life, 24 months. Just keep the bucket closed and the bag sealed, and it will not dry out.
Great, thank you.
Right.
And there is a whole lot of yes, 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 please on the showing us how to make the bear.
I love making little animals. So whenever you make something that's, you know, you want to make something that looks cute, right? So whenever we look at a little child or a baby, their heads in proportion to the body are fairly big. So that's when you get that cuteness from. So if I take my fondant, and again, I made a sausage. So we're going to take 2/3 for the body and then 1/3 for the head. So the head is, you know, still a good proportion. And then I need legs or arms. So I'm going to cut a piece and cut it in half, a little bit bigger for my legs, and then tiny bits, not much, for the ears. So that's kind of, you know, what I need really. And again, if you're doing a lot of these, you know, you need to make sure they're the same size. So I know one, so Freddie Eckentrieler is a Swiss pastry chef that used to do a lot of, and has books out on marzipan modeling. He would actually roll the marzipan out to a certain thickness, and he had cutters. And so he would take like cookie cutters and he would have them numbered. So if you knew he cut that shape out, it would be a certain weight. So that way you get a consistency, because if you have a retail store or you're selling a product, you know, your one customer walks in and wants the same size, right? So you're not giving somebody something bigger. So that's a way of ensuring that the proportions are correct. So I'm going to make a round ball for the body, and then I'm going to do the same thing I did with my flower. So I'm going to kind of taper it so it gives me that body shape. And most of the time with the animals, we're looking at something sitting or kind of crouching or four-legged. So most of the time we're using very, very similar shapes. So that would be for my body. I'm going to sit him down on a little cut, just a little ball scraper. And I'm going to make a little tummy button with the tool, okay? So now the head, and I'm going to press in a little bit. So this, because I'm doing it directly, I'm not even having to put any moisture layers in between. If you we're doing like all the bodies and then all the heads, you might want to brush them with a little bit of water before you actually put the pieces together. So now I'm going to press, I've got a round ball, okay? So I always go a lot of pressure, and I start to ease up my pressure. I might cup my hands and roll, and then I'm going to press down a little bit for the head, so it's a little bit flatter. And now before I put the head on, so you see it's pretty big in proportion, but that's what kind of gives it that cuteness. So before I put the head on, I'm going to add the ears. So for the ears, I just need 2 little round balls. Try and get them the same size. They're not quite the same size. We add a little bit more fondant. It's okay. And I'm going to put them either side. You see that? And then with my tool, I'm just going to press down into them like this. So if you did something, let's say like a cat or tiger, you would actually have pointy ears, right? If you did a monkey, the ears are further on the sides. And then my eyes, not too far apart. Okay, and then I need a little snout. So I do another piece of fondant, maybe a little bit bigger than that. So, you know, our structures are kind of always very similar. You just have to kind of pull out the characteristic. So I have my little snout like that, okay? And see? And now I'm going to drop the head onto the body, okay? So my legs, I need, again, I always need to kind of get this workable to begin with. I'm going to make a round ball, and I'm going to, again, do the same thing, use my hands, but I'm going to leave the front fairly big, okay? And this then sits around that. Same thing again, always just use this part of your hand. Now, of course, I'm just doing it white right now, but you know, you can always airbrush as well. So you can make these one color, and then you can airbrush, you know, different colors. These little bears are great for things like baby shower cakes. So I would always, for the baby showers cakes I used to do, I would do a cube, like a little building block, and then border it with a fondant. And on each side, I might have like the number, you know, if there's a little, like a bee for baby, or little ducks, just little, you know, cute flowers would always work. And then on top we would sit a bear. And then, of course, it was a little boy, it would be a little blue bear. And if it was a little girl, it would be maybe a little pink bear. And if we didn't know, we could always make yellow bears, right? Or white bears. So, but it was really a really cute little cake. So I've got the same thing, same kind of shape for my arms. And then these are kind of going to go on the back. Be punched up here. But you see, everything is very compact. And his head can be slightly tilted. So it brings, if you tilt, it brings a little bit more life into the piece, okay? His little mouth, snout, I'm just going to add cuts with a knife. And now for the eyes, I have some chocolate. So I actually have white and dark chocolate melted. You could use royal icing as well, but I think it's nice to have the eyes and the pupils and to see that. So I made little piping bags, and we'll do the white first. I don't need a lot, just a little bit. No, don't overfill your bags, right? You know that. And I've got my scissors. So if I just turn them around, I'm just going to pipe. Okay. Now, obviously, you want to let the white chocolate set before you put the dark on, but I have cold spray. So the cold spray freezes the chocolate, and that way I can pipe the dark on immediately. Okay. So now I've got my dark. And with this one, I am going to use chocolate for the nose as well. The other one, I use a little silver pearl, because that's the girl there. So now, great for Mother's Day as well. You know, you can put a little heart or some flowers, you know, in a hand, in the paws, I should say. And you want them looking in one direction and not cross-eyed, okay? And not staring forward, or they look scary.
Chef, where do you purchase that cold spray?
This is also from AUI Fine Foods. Okay, so it's a food grade cold spray, and you get this little attachment with it, so that way if you're putting together like chocolate flowers or something, you know, you can put a petal and you can spray it right in, and it freezes everything immediately. So I'd use it, you know, very, very small stuff in chocolate work. So the one of them has a bow, right? So let's not make the other one jealous. We'll give it a little bow also. But you know, in a retail store, you could do these as gifts, put them on a little base of chocolate, and have a really nice little gift. And that's nice, like in Europe, they do a lot with, you know, the fondant, but also a lot with marzipan. And you can use marzipan for doing lots of different animals and things as well. So, those are little bears. Okay. So, thank you for joining me today. So remember, before you apply fondant, you need a straight, nice, even cake. I moistened it a little bit, rolled the fondant out, and measured
the width by using my rolling pin. Is very simple, just to make sure that I have about the same size. There's nothing worse than draping your fondant on your cake and finding out that you don't have enough. And then just smoothing it out, just be very gradual. Don't try and take down any two sides too quickly, just very gradually around it. And then always finish your borders off. And you say, the way I made the roses was a pretty easy way of doing it. No tools, no cutters involved. You can buy, you can buy cutters for everything, but you really have to, evaluate, okay, how much money do I really want to spend? And there's another way of doing it. So I don't know if there's any more questions before we finish.
By all means, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and everyone watching. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I think everyone can attempt to bear it. Beforehand, it's something about the way you show it and the technique that was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Yes.
One other question is, does the Deco Magic come in any different flavors by chance?
No, it's not flavored, it's neutral. So it's not flavored, it's not colored, it's only in the white. But you can need, like say you could airbrush it, or if you want to, need the paste colors into it. I'd imagine if you get flavors, you could probably add like aromas. I would maybe do oils or something very concentrated. Whatever you do, you don't want to be adding a lot of liquid to things like this, because it's a lot of sugar, it attracts moisture. It's not going to hold up as well.
And
one more thing, we have some cupcakes we can maybe show you. So these were some things we did for another demo. So if you follow me on Instagram, I do have some videos, and we just did cupcake decoration last week. So there's just some flavored buttercreams and some cupcake ideas there for you as well. So, please follow me on social media too, because I try and get, especially in this time right now, normally I'm traveling and on the road, but right now obviously I'm working from home like everybody else. So I'm trying to post lots of videos and ideas as well about products, but ideas about decoration.
great. I have one more question that came through for now. How long are the fondant products good for after you make them?
I would think it depends on your storage. Maybe you have to remember, it's sugar. As long as things stay dry and don't get too moist, there's no reason why they wouldn't be fine for a few months. They're just really kind of just going to dry out a little bit, but airtight containers covered. The fondant that you buy in the buckets, it would probably be, like a 24-month shelf life. But on your finished products, you might want to get production going and have things ready for your cakes. And then, we've always got like busier times and slower times. So during the slower times, you get your decoration ready, and that way you're ready to add them to your cakes. But as long as you're storing things correctly, there should be no issue with shelf life whatsoever.
Okay, and one last question. What do you have coming up next? What is your next, demo? What's your next TV spot? What's your next, worldwide competition? What's next for you?
Well, right now it's kind of quiet. I did do the Culinary Olympics, and that was in February in Germany, and that was the last major competition. It's all kind of open right now. We're just trying to figure out, getting back in the industry. I'll be taking part in some virtual pastry conferences. So Pastry Art Design Magazine is putting on a virtual pastry conference. And I've asked to be part of that. So I'll be talking about tempering processes and also about ganaches. And I think they're going to launch that at the end of May. But as far as like the competitions, I'm getting old. And I love coaching. And so I think, moving forward, I would like to be more involved with coaching and mentoring than actually always doing the competitions myself. But good question. Thank you.
And thank you, Chef. Again, this was awesome. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Nice to have you all here. Bye. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.